Hi everyone, Kristina Werner here. Welcome to another video for SimonsStamp.com. Today I'm using the February 2023 card kit to create a fun donut card. I'm using the Sweet Days stamp set that comes in the kit, as well as the Hearts and Stars stencil. So I have an idea in my mind for what this card is going to be, and I thought it would work with those donut images. There's 3 donuts in the stamp set. So I'm going to first just stamp one of the donut images over and over again and cut it out so that I can sort of play with it and position it on my card. So the idea that I have in my head for my card actually looks like 6 donuts in a box. I want it to almost look like half a dozen donuts, and you can actually open up the top lid of the box and see the donuts inside. So here's my little card sketch. You can kind of see I've got the idea for the 6 donuts in a box, and then the lid opens and you can see the box of donuts. You can see the donuts inside. So my white piece of scratch paper is cut to an A2 card. So it is 5.5 inches wide by 4.25 tall. And at that point, I decided I could probably make it just a little bit smaller. So now I'm positioning these donut images on a piece of cardstock that's folded like a card to a finished size of 5 inches wide by 3.75 tall. So it's just a ½ inch smaller in each dimension. And when you make it this size, all 6 donuts fit perfectly right inside. And I thought when I looked at it, you know what, it looks like it's about a 1/4 inch around each edge. So I'm positioning my donut stamps over top of this transparency grid sheet. The transparency grid sheet is from Simon, and it just allows you to position your stamps and then close the door of your MISTI, and it picks up the transparency grid with it. And then you can peel the transparency grid off of those stamps, ink up your stamps, and then stamp onto your project, and it's in the exact position where you want it. So I've opened up my card because I do want the donuts to be on the inside of the box. So I'm stamping 2 of the donut images, and they are positioned exactly 1/4 inch from the fold and the side edge. After I had those stamped, I did stamp them twice so that I would have a solid black line. And I'm using intense black ink from Simon Says Stamp because it is a Copic friendly ink, and I'm going to be coloring the donuts with Copics. So I'm positioning that donut that goes right in the middle, and I'm going to stamp that down, and the donuts are just barely touching inside the box. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the bottom row. I can once again stamp 2 of the donuts at the same time, and I've positioned them over the transparency grid so that they're a 1/4 inch from the corners. And then I can stamp that last donut right there in the middle, and I have my 6 donuts to work with. Before I get to coloring the donuts, I'm going to create the front of the card. I'm using the A2 layers dies from Waffle Flower to cut out the rectangular window. Now these dies are perfect because I have the same ratio or dimensions as an A2 card. So I'm just picking out a smaller rectangle frame that would allow enough of the donuts to show. I'm also making sure that my greeting that I'm going to use will fit inside the die. So I place the die on the outside of my card, or outside of the donut box. And I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine with everything open. And then peeled away that window, and I'm left with the frame on the front of this box or card. And I'm going to decorate the front a little bit before we go on to the coloring. So that tape I used to die cut my window left a little bit of residue. So I just used an adhesive eraser to take that residue off. And then I protected the back of this area with some masking tape. Actually, it was masking paper that I cut down to a smaller size. So I put that above the fold, and then I took guava ink. This is a positively saturated ink color from Simon. And I first did a light layer of that guava ink for a nice pale pink. And then I used the stencil over the top and intensified the amount of ink that I used on top. And this gives me a tone-on-tone effect with the hearts and the stars. and it just gives a really nice, fun detail to the outer frame of the donut box. Okay, so it's looking really cute at this point, but I decided it would be really nice to have a gold frame around the window. So I took 2 of those dies that I used earlier to cut out the window. I used the exact same size as the window itself, and then the one that was just larger than it. So now I can use some acetate for the inside of my window. For stamping my greeting on the acetate, I couldn't see the acetate in my MISTI, so I traced the edges with a pencil and then used a black marker so I could see the edges of where the acetate would be. And then I used my transparency grid sheet once again to get that centered and positioned over that drawn black rectangle. I'm going to put my stamp on the door of my MISTI, and then I'm going to prep my acetate. Now, this is heat resistant acetate, so I can stamp and heat emboss it. So I'm going to first spritz it with a little bit of water on both sides, and then wipe it down with a soft cloth. That eliminates a lot of the static cling. And then I used an anti-static powder tool. This is the Cotton Towel from Rabbit Hole Designs. And I just put a nice thick coating of powder over the surface of my acetate. I then stamped my greeting in Versamark ink. And then I'm going to carefully pick up the transparency sheet and apply some gold embossing powder. This is gilded embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. And it looks like a mess at first, but the more you tap off the acetate, the powder comes off. The more you tap it, the powder comes off. And then I also used a clean paintbrush just to catch any other heat embossing powder that was sticking around. I then used my heat tool to heat set the powder until it was melted. Now I am applying heat, and it is a heat resistant acetate, but it does warp just a tiny bit. So I decided to place the acetate in the corner of my MISTI, apply some liquid glue, and then put my gold frame right over the top. The acetate was cut using the rectangle that I used for the outer edge of my gold frame. So it's the exact same size as the gold frame. I then put it upside down on my work surface and put some large acrylic blocks over the top just to hold it down and flat while they adhered together. I let that sit for a few minutes, and then I can adhere my acetate frame to the front of my donut box. So I'm going to put just some adhesive on the back of that frame. And the frame is just about the perfect size for the very thin foam strips from Waffle Flour. So I grabbed some very thin, narrow foam strips and just put those right behind the frame. And in some areas, the frame was a little bit wonky, a little bit narrow, but in the end, it worked out just fine. I removed the release paper and then very carefully positioned that frame directly over the window of my donut box card. So here we are. I'm going to press that down, and then I'm going to fold everything together so I can get an idea of what it's going to look like. It's still looking great. So now I'm going to start coloring the donuts on the inside of the card. So like I said before, I'm using Copic markers. And I chose to use a very limited color palette for all of these donuts. I thought it'd be really fun to, of course, have chocolate frosting because those, I think, arguably are the best donuts, chocolate with sprinkles. So I wanted to make sure I had a chocolate donut. In fact, 2 of them. One's going to be chocolate with sprinkles, and the other is going to be chocolate with just a chocolate drizzle on top. I thought that would be really, really yummy. And then I'm also going to introduce a couple of other colors onto all of these donuts. I wanted for sure to have the chocolate, but also you have to have some sort of strawberry, like pink. Kind of a pink frosting on a donut is pretty classic. So I brought in some reds and red violet shades just to get that pink in there. And then I also did the stripy one. For a third kind of main color, I brought in a blue violet, and I thought this color went really well with sort of like the very sweet kind of Valentine's Day color vibes I had going. As far as the sprinkles go, I brought in some yellow and also some blue just to get a little bit more color. And then for the background on these donuts, or I should say the donuts themselves, I used a yellow red shade, which is like a very gold color. I thought it really lent itself to sort of that golden fried color for the donuts. So I just brought that all around. And then for the background behind the donuts, I specifically chose a gray background because I wanted it to be neutral and not kind of fight or compete with any of the colors on the donuts. But also when the whole donut box is closed and there's that greeting in gold on the acetate, I knew I needed kind of like a darker background to go behind that gold greeting because I really wanted the gold greeting to stand out. And if I used a lighter shade or kept it white, it just wouldn't look as good or be as legible when everything's closed. So as you can see, by having a gray background, it kind of darkens and shadows up the donut box. And then you can very legibly read the greeting on the front. So we're not quite done. We have to kind of assemble this now. I want it to fit on a regular A2 card and also go into an envelope. And I also needed somewhere to write a greeting to the recipient. So I just adhered it directly to the front of an A2 card. And that gives me the opportunity to still have that donut box open and close, but I can also have that whole area on the inside of the card to write a greeting to my recipient. So I think it was a gray marker left a little dot right on this donut. It's on the donut right next to it too, but this is the one where it was super obvious. So I used a Copic colorless blender, the 0, to kind of bleach out that dark gray shade. And then I came back in with the yellow shade and kind of colored that in. I wanted the donut box to be able to open and close, but I wanted the recipient to be able to open and close it multiple times. So I considered using some string and tying a bow there. I think that would look really great, almost like, how they tie up a bakery box. I think that would be amazing. But in the end, I decided to use a little bit of hook and loop, kind of like Velcro fastener on the very bottom. So I just adhered that to the top and bottom and then closed it. For a little bit of added detail, like a bakery box, I decided to make a little, almost like a tag shape that would go up in the top corner. So I wanted that same purple shade, and I don't have cardstock that matches. So I used my Copic marker to color a large area and then stamped and heat embossed in that same gilded embossing color, just a little tiny heart from the stamp set. I trimmed that down and then used some foam adhesive to adhere that to the very front of the card. So this is the finished card. You can still open and close it and see that all the donuts inside, but it's also a regular card where you can open up all of it and there is a blank area on the inside to write a message to the recipient. So once again, this stamp set is included, stamp set and stencil that I used today. Both of them are included in the February 2023 card kit from MISTI Stamp. So check out the links down below, go over there and you can pick up the card kit or maybe just even the stamp set and stencil. Thanks so much for watching today. I will catch you guys in another video very soon.
I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysstamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.